In previous chapters, we developed a voting system to upvote or downvote a question. And in that chapter, we discussed about a bad user experience that when we click upvote or downvote button, we are navigating away from this page to another page to show the result of the process. Let's click the upvote button. You see, we are navigated to another page called voting result JSP, and the message is shown here. So when we want to see the new point of the question, we need to navigate to display question page and refresh the page again to see the new result, and this is a really terrible user experience. A good example for a good user experience is stackoverflow.com. Here, when we click the upvote button, all the voting process has been done seamlessly. Point of the question is updated again seamlessly without navigating to another page. This functionality can be done by using AJAX technology. In this chapter, we'll implement the AJAX technology for our voting system. But before implementing it, let's look at the theory behind the AJAX technology. In current implementation, we have been navigated to another page because all our requests were synchronous. We are doing something in the HTML page, and when we click a button, we are completely navigating away from the client side to the server side with sending some data to the server side, and server processes the data and returns back to our client. Between this interval, the user cannot do anything else but waiting the system processing. Whenever a user sends some data to the server, he or she is basically blocking all other possible activities, because this is a classic web application model and all the requests are synchronous. So client must wait for the server and server must wait for the client requests. That's all. But in AJAX technology, the model is asynchronous, so client doesn't have to wait for the server's processing. Instead of this, the AJAX engine listens for the server processing, and when the server returns some data back, our AJAX engine notify our browser UI, our HTML page. And while the server side is processing, our client does not wait for the response, but the client can go on interacting with other buttons, So as you can see, there is no gap between the request and the response. User is basically going on to interact with other buttons. This is done by the AJAX engine. Let's get into the details of the AJAX engine. AJAX engine is based on the XMLHttpRequest object. With the help of the JavaScript, we are creating instances of XMLHttpRequest instances, and in our HTML page we will communicate with XMLHttpRequest instance via JavaScript calls. These objects provides the ability to send asynchronous requests to the server side. With these objects, we are able to be noticed in each step of the flow. For instance, when the request is sent successfully, we are noticed. When the headers of the response received, we will be noticed, and when all the process is done, we will be noticed. And when we are noticed from these events, we can manipulate the HTML page that we are in with JavaScript. XMLHttpRequest has some methods and attributes. It has three methods: open, send, and set request header. It has some internal attributes: ready state, status, response text, and response XML. Ready state is the state of the instance. It shows whether the request is created successfully, sent the request, or some error occurred in the process. This attribute is updated whenever an event occurs. and status means the result of the process. It's basically HTTP codes. We will get into the details in the next slides. And we have two more attributes that is storing the result of the process. Let's check the methods of XMLHttpRequest object. The first one is open. It gets an HTTP method, get, post, put, delete, or etc., and it gets a URL. In our instances, it's basically the mapping of our servlets. Since our voting servlet's URL is voting, we will post some data to our voting servlet. That's all. And setRequestHeader sets the attributes in the request header. For instance, in our voting system, we'll send some form data, so the content type should be set as application form URL encoded. And the last method is send. This basically sends the real data to XMLHttpRequest instance with this configuration. And in our example, the data is question ID is 1, type is up. That's all. Now let's check a successful AJAX flow. We are in our HTML page or JSP page rendered to an HTML page, okay? We'll create an instance of XMLHttpRequest instance. Here the ready state of our instance is basically 0, and after that we are calling the open method, and ready state changes to 1, and whenever this ready state is changed, an event is triggered to the HTML page, as you can see in the orange lines. Whenever an orange line, an event is bubbled to the HTML page, you can manipulate the HTML page accordingly. For instance, you may say that we are started to process your request, okay, something like that. After that, we'll send the data from the HTML page via JavaScript, and in this case, ready state changes to 2. Again, you can manipulate the data since the ready state is changed. And after that, this instance sends the data to server, and our server processes the data and sends the result back as JSON or XML or a basic string, and our ready state changes to 3. You may get the event since the ready state change and manipulate the HTML. After getting the result from the server, the ready state is changed to 4, and status is basically HTTP status 200. That means the successful case. And when you get the event for this ready state modification, you can manipulate the HTML accordingly. So to sum up the ready state values, it is 0 when the XMLHttpRequest instance is just constructed. It is 1 when it is open. It is 2 when the header is received from the response. And it is 3 while reading the response entity body from the server. And it is 4 when all the response has been gathered from the server. So the successful state means that ready state is 4 and the status is HTTP 200. Other status codes are 301, 403 and 404. You know, the codes of the HTTP protocol. So a basic AJAX call flow goes like that. You create an XMLHttpRequest instance, you configure the URL and the HTTP method, get, post, etc. Send the real data. After that, obtain and parse the result. If you are getting a JSON, you need to parse the result accordingly and put this data somewhere in your HTML page accordingly. That's all. Now let's create a script tag here to write our JavaScript methods, and my method name is load XML doc, and it will get an attribute, get and parameter vote type up or down. Inside it, I'll create a XMLHttpRequest instance. Here we will use a dirty code because XMLHttpRequest creation method changes from browser to browser. Internet Explorer has some other technique from the other browsers like Firefox or Chrome. They are using ACTIVX object, but others simply use XMLHttpRequest object. So if current window supports XMLHttpRequest, this attribute will be set to a new XMLHttpRequest. Otherwise, if it is Internet Explorer, it is created as an ActiveX object. Just for now I'm using this code because soon we will use jQuery objects to create XMLHttpRequest instances, because jQuery provides us the cross-browser capabilities. But for now this is enough to use this technique. After that I'll register event listener for already state change. This is basically a function, and this function will be triggered whenever the ready state of our XMLHttp instance is changed, as I explained to you in the slides. Okay, so let's handle first the successful case. The successful case was that ready state is 4 and the status is 200. Okay, so the ready state is 4, and if XMLHttp.status equals to 200, we are in the successful case. So I will basically alert the response text of my XMLHttpRequest instance. But if something goes wrong, I want to alert your vote cannot be saved. Otherwise, you can add another else block other than 4 to interpret the intersteps between the request and the response. But I just want to handle the response, so I'm alerting the response text of XMLHttp in the successful case. After registering my listener, I'll basically open and send this XMLHttpRequest instance as I explained you in the slides. Open the instance. First I'll use post method. I'll send my data with HTTP post method to my voting servlet, right? After that, XMLHttp set request header to notify my XMLHttpRequest instance that you will send some form data. Okay, so I'm changing the content type to form URL encoded. After that, I'll send my data. Question ID equals to, let's get it from the JSTL. This is perfect legal for getting the value from the JSTL, so I put it here, and type equals to the vote type. So we basically open set request header and send the data to voting servlet via HTTP post method, and whenever ready state changes, this function will be triggered, and in the successful case we'll alert the response text. Otherwise, alert your vote cannot be saved. That's all. Now let's put the buttons to trigger. First, I'm putting a button that is triggering load XML doc method with up parameter when it's click upvote, and I'm copying and pasting it with down and down vote. Let's check the result. I'm clicking upvote button. Yes, I'm in do post method as I'm submitting a proper HTML form. Okay, I get the question ID as 1. I got the user ID from the session, and I got the type as up, and I'm going on. Okay, so everything is gone right. Yes, here is the result. The result of the XMLHttpRequest instance is HTML of the page that we have been navigated to. So this is not what we want, so I'm slightly changing the result to something proper. We got some HTML output as response text, since we are redirecting the user to a JSP page. For using the AJAX technology properly, we must not redirect the response to another page, but we need to write something with the writer instance of the response. We have learned about the writer instance in the first chapters. Okay, and I need to write something here. The most proper thing to write here is the result. Since it is an enum, I'm writing the name of the enum, so it's basically voting successful, already voted down, and the others. And the logic here should be moved to the JavaScript. Let's check it. Here I'm clicking the upvote button, and you see we alerted already voted up. This is not a proper message, but the logic navigation. So when we get already voted up, we need to write the proper message. So if the response text equals to already voted up, alert, you already voted up for this question, and let's do the same thing for the other possibilities. Okay, we are done with the logical messages. Now let's try the new implementation. You see, you already voted up for this question, so we alerted a logical, meaningful message to the user. So we have one more step. We should not alert the message, but we need to update some of the DOM elements here, because alert is also a not good user experience. Now let's use some basic JavaScript methods to manipulate the data inside the HTML elements. Okay, for a good user experience, we need to update the upvote and downvote count just after getting the response from the server. That's why I add a upvote count and downvote count spans to the HTML page, and they show us the upvote and downvote counts as they do here, 18 and 2. I have slightly modified the code, the block of voting successful. Basically, if the vote type is up, I get the value of upvote count spans inner HTML. It's basically 18 in our example, and I parse it to an integer. After that, I'm updating the inner HTML of this span after incrementing the total number by 1. So this will be 19, and it will be set as an inner HTML to upvote count span. If the vote type is down, I will do the same thing for downvote count, and I will update the downvote count. And if the result is unsuccessful, I need a voting message. Say style color is red and it's empty. If we are inside this block, I will update the inner HTML as we already voted up. Okay, the same thing for the other message. Here I emptied the vote table so the process will be successful. Now I'll try the downvote. You see, we get the result and it is 3 now. Downvote count is 3 now. Let's refresh the page if it's successfully inserted. You see, it's 3. So we persisted the new value. If we say upvote, it basically says you already voted up for this question, and upvote and downvote counts are the same. They're not modified. Okay, that's all. We completed the AJAX flow successfully.